I love unhinged female characters. There's something so cathartic in the books that contain them, something so relatable and yet so far cut off from reality. They strike me as the realest words I've ever read, but also they make me feel that if I do relate to them, I'm kind of insane. So, needless to say, reading about unhinged female characters has become a hobby in itself for me. Deranged, struggling, depressed, or unbalanced, whatever you want to call them, these women in fiction have become true symbols for what it means to be a woman inside and out. And I don't mean by that women are crazy. What I mean is that they're powerful. These characters are unstoppable. And I've seen these books on the internet kind of everywhere, especially when it comes to Otessa Moshfegh's books. She writes the craziest, realest, and most disgusting female characters out there, but also she gives them such a real sensibility that it's hard not to feel at least a little bit connected to them. When I first read an Otessa Moshfegh book, it gave me the impression that I was finally reading something that I've been wanting to read since forever, but I never even knew that I had this desire. And because of this, her books are really refreshing. Who doesn't want to read about a woman that locks herself in a room and wants to sleep for a whole year just to come out purified by the end? The reason I'm filming this video is because I did try to film another video where I ranked all of these books based on how unhinged the female characters are. But then I realized I have to step up my game a little bit to try to look into them and their personalities and defects, everything that makes them who they are. Because in that video that I tried to film, I could never quite put my finger on it. Everything that I ended up saying was, yeah, I don't know. I like this character. She's just badass. The essence of these stories, I'm still not sure if I've come close to figuring it out. But I can at least confidently say a couple more things than I could have before actually diving into them. So, what do all of these stories have in common? First, there's gotta be a catalyst: confusion. Both The Coin by Yasmin Zaher and My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Moshfegh have main characters that remain nameless throughout the books. To put it plainly, they're both universal figures of displacement. In Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, the main character's name is mentioned a couple times at most, and that's because she does not like her own name. She just doesn't feel like it suits her. Her name is Janina, by the way. And she's also the type of person that doesn't really use real names for anyone that she meets. She gives names to people based on their personalities, but she doesn't agree with the fact that people should be given names at birth. She would rather live in a world where people would get names based on who they truly are. She takes comfort in astrology because she desires certainty, and that's the only place she can find it. In The Coin, our main character takes comfort in being clean. For Tessa Moshfegh, it's different. Her main characters find solace in shutting the world out. But all of them have one aim to which they strive impetuously, and that is to take back control. And what drives them there? Confusion. In Convenience Store Woman, our main character says, "My present self is formed almost completely of the people around me. Homesick for another world. I love it, or at least I ought to love it." I've never been very clear on that distinction. In Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, the main character sees herself as a puzzle that she cannot solve. And my favorite quote that clarifies this idea is from Fleabag. I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She's an icon, and I'm obsessed with her. I just think I want someone to tell me how to live my life, Father, because so far I think I've been getting it wrong. But don't be fooled by this confusion. These characters know what they want, and they're not afraid to speak their minds. For example, we have Otessa Moshfegh in My Year of Rest and Relaxation. The main character says this: "We probably shouldn't be friends. I've been thinking about it, and I see no reason to continue." There's a certain easiness with which she says that. She knows what she wants. I actually believe that these characters are so confused by everything that's going on around them, not because they don't know who they are, but because they know so well who they are, but everything around them tells them they're not good enough or that they shouldn't be like that. They are perplexed with life and everything it entails. They hate ignorant people and abide themselves to the simple principle of wholeness. This is what will save them and will put them as far as possible from the people they despise. Because being on the same mental level as everyone else in their lives would be a nightmare. And it's never felt right. They always felt as if there's something distinct in the way that they choose to live their life, but they could never actually express what that is. And as they've matured, their ideas got more and more tangible, and what they realize is that they've just been disoriented, a byproduct of trying to live your life by obeying society's rules and conditions. So then, a longing is born in their minds, a longing for individuality and unity with oneself. The obsession with being pure. Now, stick with me, because it's gonna get a little bit abstract, if you will. Have you ever had the feeling that you're not who you truly are? That you're living somebody else's life? That your existence isn't in actual accordance with your being? That you could be so much, but you're just not there yet? And one day, you have the realization that you'll never get there unless you do something about it. And for these characters, that is purification. These books encompass this idea perfectly, and especially My Year of Rest and Relaxation, because it puts a bigger emphasis on this process of purification than I think any other modern book that I've read. Everyone lives a veiled life, but they don't realize it, and the protagonist sees through it. She needs to come out in a new form out of this year of rest. She needs to purge daily life out of her system with all its mundane aspects and vanitous desires. Other books, like A Clergyman's Daughter or Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, they do it from a standpoint of providence, of what it truly means to be just and good, avoiding sacrilegious practices and ways of thinking at all costs. But what does this process of purification even entail? Well, as we've seen, for some, it means sleeping for a year. For others, it involves penitence, self-punishment, even putting everything back in divine order by taking revenge. In Death in Her Hands, Vesta feels a sense of relief and accomplishment when she experiences a monumental amount of spite for someone. Spite that becomes cathartic. And this, my friends, is the way she purges out the impure in her life. It was exciting to feel so much spite for somebody. It inspired me. I almost felt like dancing. If I was an artist, I thought, I would paint a huge black and red canvas, stabbing with my brush in a frenzy, until I fell down on the floor in a heap, sweating and dizzy, the world spinning above me. I wished I could be breathless like that. And for so long, I'd believed I couldn't. Now, this aspect of anger that feels almost like freedom, we also see in Drive Your Plow with this particular quote. Sometimes, when a person feels anger, notice the capital A in there, everything seems simple and obvious. Anger puts things in order and shows you the world in a nutshell. Anger restores the gift of clarity of vision, which is hard to attain in any other state. They become aware of the bad, of the dirty, of the unjust, and their purging of it through anger. This is their way of taking back control of their lives again. This is them at the wheel, and it is also the exact reason for which these female characters are at first confused and then disturbed. They come off as manic when they talk about how they want to achieve enlightenment and be fun, disturbed in their ways and obsessive in their nature, but it's all because they have a higher purpose. How to disappear completely. This need for disappearance seems to not be the same as the need to vanish completely off the face of the earth. Even though at times the characters mention death as a means to escape, they do not truly want it. At least none except for Esther Greenwood from the Bell Jar. Because we all know what happened to Sylvia Plath. But still, Esther mentioned she feels ready for a new life, which means that the need for vanishing completely is not the case here either, alas. I believe that this desire to disappear could be translated as nothing more than the need for solitude, where the intention of finding oneself is predominant, if not the whole point. And Sally Rooney and Otessa Moshfegh have put it in the clearest terms possible. In Conversations with Friends, Sally Rooney says, I was appropriating my fear of total disappearance as a spiritual practice. I was inhabiting disappearance as something that could reveal and inform, rather than totalize and annihilate. In My Year of Rest, Otessa Moshfegh says, This was how I knew the sleep was having an effect. I was growing less and less attached to life. If I kept going, I thought, I'd disappear completely. then reappear in some new form. This was my hope. This was the dream. If evil created the world, then good must destroy it. For my case here, I could say, if my surroundings created me, then I must purge of my surroundings and instead surround myself only with me. Wanting to get into a state where my surroundings and the people around me don't have a say in who I am anymore. To cut off the external in order to focus on the internal. To get into a somewhat of a intrauterine state. Because that seems to be the goal in the moment that they venture into isolation. You could say that that's similar to being back in the womb. The only time in your life when you were actually pure from head to toe. In The Bell Jar, Esther Greenwood says, I never feel so much myself as when I'm in a hot bath. I lay in that tub and I felt myself growing pure again. I don't believe in baptism or the waters of Jordan or anything like that, but I guess I feel about a hot bath the way those religious people feel about holy water. And this disappearance is actually the step that they take in order to ward off all confusion. And that's because getting to know oneself is liberating, and for these women in particular, that can only be done in solitude. And what I have to add to this is, wait, I wrote that down. Where is it? I'm trying to move the photo booth so that I can see. Listen to this. I'm quite proud of this sentence that I wrote here. For the woman who wants nothing more than to find herself in solitude, there is solace. Bring it in. This need to find oneself is quite strong. We will go back to Sylvia Plath now. I did find a quote that is perfect for what I'm trying to prove. I'm not afraid of being lost. We all wander off from time to time. It's the fear of never quite finding myself that keeps me up at night. Bernard Schlink actually has a very good quote in The Reader. Now, I know he's a man. We do have some men authors in here. He makes a point that's very beneficial for my case here. To escape involves not just running away, but arriving somewhere. I said what I said. I was reading from As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and I realized that there's something that I need to add to all this. The quote is, men are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. The man who does not shrink from self-crucifixion can never fail to accomplish the object upon which his heart is set. This self-crucifixion that he talks about here could be translated for us as the desire to disappear. This is their way of crucifixion in order to make their life better. They don't want to live miserable lives, and they're ready to take every sacrifice needed in order to change their circumstances. Quote, suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. It is an indication that the individual is out of harmony with himself. The sole and supreme use of suffering is to purify, to burn out all that is useless and impure. Suffering ceases for him who is pure. Unquote. As a Man Thinketh, you can't really see it here. Great little book. And there's another little aspect here that drives them to this incessant need of disappearance. Vanity. Otessa Moshfegh once said that vanity is the enemy. But I came and I transformed that into vanity is insanity, because it sounds so much catchier and it just appeals to the public. Regardless, all of these characters are aware of what it means to be conventionally beautiful, the ups and downs, the advantages and disadvantages of it, and they do not want to be part of that world once they become aware of it. Vanity is defined as excessive pride in or admiration of one's own appearance or achievements. Gail Honeyman says, I feel sorry for beautiful people. Beauty, from the moment you possess it, is already slipping away, ephemeral. That must be difficult. Sally Rooney adds, I think the beauty industry is responsible for some of the worst ugliness we see around us in our visual environment. And the worst, most false aesthetic ideal, which is the ideal of consumerism. Moshfegh, on the other hand, says, being pretty only kept me trapped in a world that valued looks above all else. Actually, it's not on the other hand. It's on the same hand. They all mean the same thing. Phoebe Waller-Bridge in Fleabag.
I sometimes worry that I wouldn't be such a feminist if I had bigger tits.
And from that, we actually see that these female characters do not stop themselves from judging other female characters. When boys get angry with each other, they just fight it out and it's all over. But girls are dirty. They pretend to be your friend and go behind your back. Sylvia Plath. Girls like that make me sick. I'm so jealous, I can't speak. It's funny because here we get jealousy, but also she's appalled. I guess that's the nature of a woman. Then we have a similar quote to what I read you from Moshfegh, with her telling her friend that she didn't want to be her friend anymore. I made a decision about Doreen that night. I decided I would watch her and listen to what she said, but deep down, I would have nothing at all to do with her. In My Year of Rest and Relaxation, we get the unnamed female character, the main character, who has a best friend called Reva. And Otessa Moshfegh says this about her. Reva was like the pills I took. They turned everything, even hatred, even love, into fluff I could bat away. Why is that? Because they see the vanity in these women and they want to distance themselves from that. But there is a catch. These characters are also aware of the vanitous inclinations that they themselves possess, but in a different manner. For example, we have the protagonist of My Year of Rest and Relaxation. It's so tiring to pronounce that title every time. If only she would have a name, it'd be much easier. Anyways, she desires attention, but she refuses to voice it in any way because she would find that humiliating. And then Eileen says that having to breathe was an embarrassment in itself. And there's a sentiment here. It's the incapacity to be more than a mere human is shameful. It implies repulsive bodily functions. It also implies vulnerability. Remember when we talked about the coin? Well, her obsession with being clean on every inch of her body, I believe it actually stems from this idea. The impurity that being human entails. They're all ashamed of that. And they find it disgusting. And living as they have been living for so long, it got to a point where they're having difficulty getting out of bed in the morning because there's nothing to look forward to anymore. It takes a village for them to get dressed, to put on perfume, to brush their teeth, and to go to work. And this whole process is off-putting to them. It's not the reason why they came on this earth. It's not what they're supposed to be doing. In the new me, the protagonist says that there's a nightmare familiarity every morning when I wake. The quality of the light, sort of grayish dim, the stiff feeling of my body, the smell, part dirty clothing, part cooking oil, part garbage, part incense. I'm reminded of how afraid I am to die and how every morning is just one more used up day. Now, what I believe is that these women need a room of their own, just like Virginia Woolf said, but a little bit different. Because in order to come to themselves and be at peace with their lives, they need to escape. And this room is sometimes found in sleep, like in My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This was the beauty of sleep. Reality detached itself and appeared in my mind as casually as a movie or a dream. In The Coin, our character looks at sleep as her closest ally because it broke time apart. Quote, if my existence had been continuous, I wouldn't have made it, unquote. And what I mean here is that they need to be unbothered, but not by people, unbothered by the world. And no, I'm not talking about a literal, physical room. All of these women already have that room, mentally and physically. Maybe the walls are a bit too thin and sound from the outside manages to reach their ears when they feel most at peace, which is the reason why they need that purification that we talked about earlier, because through that process, they can actually make those walls grow a little thicker and stronger. The truth they find in the idea of death. In Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, Janina describes death as just and fair, like a disinfectant or a vacuum cleaner. In Death in Her Hands, Vesta asks herself how people can be so ignorant to death, as if they're not surrounded by it. In some of these books, this disappearance they so strive for is actually seen as a process of decay, which naturally leads to being reborn. Just like in alchemy, where we have nigredo, which is the process of decomposition that leads to rubedo, which in alchemy represents the new self. And I'm going to read you a quote from this book. There's beauty in the struggle, just like J. Cole said. For these women, they have to struggle. It's not even that, well, there is also the fact that they want to struggle because that's as low as they can go, but it's also the fact that there's no other choice for them. I'm going to read you a quote from Dying and Creating by Rosemary Gordon. This book is truly, I have no words. You should read it. Conflict and struggle may be felt as the necessary condition in order to be able to experience oneself as existing, as present. In A Clergyman's Daughter, George Orwell said, "Think of the details of life, and then think that there is no meaning, no purpose, no goal, except the grave." Sylvia Plath also encompasses this idea perfectly in The Bell Jar. Certain people like me had to live in hell before they died to make up for missing out on it after death. Well, hell can teach you a whole damn lot. The floor seemed wonderfully solid. It was comforting to know I had fallen and could fall no further. And the last one, I was quite proud of the calm way I stared at all those gruesome things. Why is she proud of that? For them, that is the reality of life. It's death because of all of the struggles and gruesome things that it entails. After you go through it, you become another person. You're reborn. You want that because you want the walls of your room to become stronger. You don't wish for incessant chit chats anymore. You don't want any sound to go through those walls. And the experience of having died, metaphorically speaking, which is the equivalent of that disappearance that we talked about. When you get back to the world, everything is different. But at the same time, everything is the same. You're the one that's different. You're more powerful, and also you're equipped with a lot of different resources that you've gathered throughout your journey. Anyone who devotes their life to fighting society in order to be free must be pretty sincere about suffering. And then Moshfegh says that pain is not the only touchstone for growth. Well, it's not the only one, which means that it's still one of them. I feel like these two quotes really express the idea of growing through affliction, and that turns out to be the same thing as freedom or as being reborn. And this growing through affliction is the disappearance that we talked about. Something that Mircea Eliade has said rings true here more than anywhere. The scenario for initiates is always the same. It is suffering, torture, death, and resurrection. Rosemary Gordon asks, can a person create, be he artist, scientist, analysant, or analyst, if he represses awareness of death and if he fails to grapple with the making of some sort of conscious attitude towards it? And I think that's the exact subject that these books are all tackling. They're trying to bring death, this idea, into their awareness because they know that's what's going to change them. They know what it means to be. While going through all of these books, I noticed a pattern in the way that the female characters position themselves above men. Take Eileen, for example. A grown woman is like a coyote. She can get by on very little. Men are more like house cats. Leave them alone for too long and they'll die of sadness. In My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Moshfegh says, my first impression of him was that he was free-spirited. That proved to be completely inaccurate. And I believe that shows that she tended to see the best in people and things that weren't truly there. So this is another reason why this need to be reborn came into being, so that she won't be so naive anymore. And just to conclude this idea, I'm gonna quote Mindy McGinnis. Everyone thinks if you fix a male dog, it will lower his aggression. But most of the biters are female. It's basic instinct to protect their womb. You see it in all animals. The female of the species is more deadly than the male. Actually, no, that was not the quote that we're concluding with. I do have two more quotes to express this idea as clearly as I can, and who's gonna help me with that? Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Again, women are born with pain built in. It's our physical destiny. Period pains, sore boobs, childbirth. We carry it within ourselves throughout our lives. Men don't. They have to seek it. Despite this pain that we're born with and made to endure, we still have the ability to be tender. What does a woman see in a woman that she can't see in a man? Dr. Nolan paused. Then she said, tenderness. That shut me up. And it's not only that we have the capacity for it, but it's a factor that defines us. It's what makes us feminine. And this is probably what Otessa Moshfegh meant when she said, in my year of rest and relaxation again, looking at my reflection really did soothe me, though I hated my face with a passion. Such is the life of the self-obsessed. I think there's a possibility it might have been the tenderness in her eyes that soothed her. And for this lack of tenderness in the opposite sex, they get appalled by men who seem to have it all figured out, while their own sorrow is growing day by day. And because these female characters really know what it means to be, they prefer to spend most of the time that they have to themselves with themselves. I was happy alone in the depths of my mind. There was no one to arouse my shame. I feel very, very alone. We're all alone, I told her. It was true. I was. She was. This was the maximum comfort I could offer. In solitude, there's no risk of being misunderstood. Because they're aware of this risk, they prefer to be quiet in social situations. Sally Rooney says, I think I only appear smart by staying quiet as often as possible. In another book, she mentions, this idea is so basic that when I first thought of it, I felt brilliant. And then I wondered if I was an idiot. And that's the risk that I'm talking about. Because I don't want to have a conversation with someone where all that I can think about is, what if I embarrass myself? What if I say something that seems brilliant to me, but it turns out to be a load of bullshit? So then I choose, well, not me, but them, choose to have the deepest conversations with themselves. That's the only possibility to have a true conversation, the monologue. In Exciting Times, we get the opposite, actually. The main character says, I enjoyed conversations where I wasn't attempting to persuade anyone, where I just said precisely what I thought. And I feel like that is the exact goal of all of these women when it comes to social situations. Just the way that Otessa Moshfegh did with her friend when she told her that she doesn't want to be friends with her anymore. Whereas in the Bell Jar, Esther Greenwood realizes that she doesn't want to be friends with that woman in her life anymore, but she never tells her. She's decided that she's gonna listen to her and talk to her, but she doesn't mean anything to her anymore. And I think that if she respected herself, she would have done the exact same thing that the character in My Year of Rest and Relaxation did, which is to tell that person you don't want to be friends with them anymore. But it's so hard for these people to do that because they're confused. Keep up. They disappoint themselves. Halle Butler, Sally Rooney, and Otessa Moshfegh all mention this factor of disappointment that their characters feel when they fail their own plans. Not following through with the plan is lack of discipline, and as we all know, lack of discipline makes you ugly. I love these characters, and they're not ugly to me, and they're not ugly to their fellow characters, but they become ugly for themselves when they fail to follow through with their intentions. And those intentions become nothing more than a mere ghost of an idea they once had, something that could have become and should have become if only they wouldn't have gotten in their own way. The reason why I love reading about this is because I tend to judge myself very harshly when I fail to do something, and I'm always struck by the sense that I am undeserving of what I truly desire. For example, I'm a morning person and I prefer to wake up early. And when I fail to do that, my mind immediately tells me I shouldn't wake up at all because already so many hours are lost. And I tell myself that I can just start again tomorrow because it'll be fresh. It'll be clean. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, I wake up at 9 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. like I wanted to. I'm just gonna stay in bed and I'm gonna lose the whole day, but that's all right because tomorrow is a new day and it's gonna be, I'm gonna be fresh as a daisy. And it's gonna feel good to know that I was in control of the whole day. I've been getting a little bit better with that. I try to have a decent day even if I wake up at 9 a.m. But most of the time, the idea of those hours that I didn't make use of throughout the day, I still think about them. And I truly feel like that impacts my sense of self-worth and self-love. It's all gone down the drain because I can't discipline myself enough. But see, that shouldn't be the case. But it is the case for these characters, And it is the case for me, unfortunately. Another factor that is present throughout most of these books is the sense of the divine, especially predominant in A Clergyman's Daughter and Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. Janina feels like there is actually a divine order to things. In A Clergyman's Daughter, the main character, unfortunately, is so religious that every time she does something she feels as sacrilegious, she pinches herself, or I don't remember exactly what else she does. Her idea of getting forgiveness from God is actually through self-penitence. I want to talk about Fleabag also because she falls in love with a priest. And I thought about that for a little bit, and I realized that this was her process of purification. But the thing is that she wasn't looking for it. She was avoiding it by all means. She never wanted to meet herself by talking to the audience, making fun of every traumatic experience she was going through as if it were unimportant. Going out with a stranger she met on the bus that she found very unattractive. She felt disgusted with herself and what she had said yes to, repulsed by her own relationships, and wondering if she's even feminist enough. Well, everything changes when she falls in love with this priest. He's the only one that sees through the veil and can recognize when she falls out of touch with reality. And keep in mind that nobody else was ever able to notice that until he came. He is her connection to the divine, and God speaks through him when he says, "It'll pass." And lastly, I would like us to focus on the connection between the author's state of mind and these unhinged female characters that they write so well. Going back to Dying and Creating, Rosemary Gordon believes in order to create, a person needs to be aware of and affirm his personal characteristics, history, and idiosyncrasies, and yet hold himself available to experience sudden moments of inspiration, illumination, possession, and vision. What I believe is that these characters that we've been talking about are products of the author's incessant struggle between life's constant, intruding hum and those moments of inspiration and vision that Rosemary Gordon speaks of. She goes on to add, "We must postulate that, like all other instincts, the creative instinct also is subject in vicissitudes, distortions, and obstructions as a result of one or other psychological conflict. These women in fiction are all a result of someone's mind. To be an author is to be an artist. You need to explore and express yourself. Yet, all of these authors, they're only human, locked in their bodies. Just like us, they also have aspirations and they feel in their gut that they have a purpose. But the earth is cruel and damaging. There's tremendous effort involved when you start on a journey of bettering yourself and achieving all of those goals. So, what can you do in order to have a cathartic experience at this point? Think about it. You're an author, a woman. You feel so much, but you feel dragged down by your environment. You have one advantage. You're very good with words and stories. Well, the answer is you create a female character that's going through these struggles on a level that's higher than everything you've ever been through. All because you want to explore how it feels to get there, to get to that lowest point or to that highest point. And the beauty of fiction is that you can see what it'd be like through the story that you write. You can make up that world. You can create different scenarios. You can create characters. You can make the characters as unhinged as you want. Thank you for watching. I'll be seeing you sometime soon. Probably. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, bye. I don't know how relevant this is going to be to the video, but I really feel the need to read this poem because I feel like these characters strive for what this poem entails here. It's called Invictus by William Ernest Henley, and I think you already know it. And it goes like this. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.